Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Hotsport. I hope you guys enjoyed yesterday's first part to my 4-hour podcast with Asaf from Running the Bench. There's a lot of good stuff. Today, we are actually going to be giving you part 2 of that podcast. And in this episode, we will discuss the Eagles offseason moving forward, the changes at offensive coordinator. Out went Kellen Moore after being hired as head coach of the New Orleans Saints, and in came an internal hire, being Kevin Patullo, coming from being the Eagles passing game coordinator to now being the offensive coordinator. Plus, all of the outgoings and incomings, a full offseason guide to the Philadelphia Eagles, where we think the Eagles can address the needs that have been now kind of put onto this roster following all the departures. And yeah, it was a fun recording one. I hope you guys enjoy. Of course, make sure you are hitting the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to Hotsport. And as well, make sure that you subscribe to Riding the Bench. So you can see from yesterday's episode that he is a very, very talented podcaster, and he knows a lot about the Philadelphia Eagles especially, and the NFL in general. So this has been a bit of a treat for all my fellow Eagle fans. I hope you guys enjoy. Take it away right here on the NFL show on Hotsport. This is an excellent segue to the second half of this podcast. So We're going to talk about the Eagles moving forward and the offseason. And it obviously began, as we were just talking about Kellen Moore and the Sirianni thing, it began when Kellen Moore decided, I think we knew prior to the Super Bowl, but it was made official not long after that he was becoming the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. And we decided to go internal with our hire with Kevin Patullo. What is your feeling on Kevin Patullo as, our hire as the offense coordinator? What are your confidence levels in terms of him? And of course, he has always been the right-hand man of Nick Sirianni. They've always been connected at the hip. So a lot of people might think that Kevin Patullo is going to be basically just a Nick Sirianni clone. What do you think? What do you think is the truth behind this?
You may not like the answer that I give, but I don't know if he's the right guy for the job. I don't know, because we all thought Brian Johnson was the right man for the job and thought it was going to fit like a glove. And it was one of the more choppy seasons that I can remember in terms of watching Philadelphia run their offensive scheme. I will say this with Kevin Patullo, though. He does have a track record of shit. I dropped my damn notes.
All good.
About Kevin Patullo, but he has a damn good track record of really, really high quality play in terms of whenever he has his hands on a certain operation. Okay, so
Right.
I'll kind of do a quick spark.
Please run me through the notes. So you're actually honestly, you're lightning me because
okay.
I've known him as a guy in the background, but I don't necessarily know about him as much.
Right now, again, take it for what you will. I'm just doing it based on this was his title. This was what that position group did, or what, that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make you. So in 2012, he was the Bills' assistant wide receivers coach. And back then, the Buffalo Bills were an absolute train wreck. And I believe that was also the year.
Who were the wide receivers of the Bills in 2012?
That was when Stevie Johnson came into the fray. And we remember the run that Stevie Johnson had in the beginning of his Buffalo Bills career. It was like a 2 to 3 year run where he was like, wow, this is a really, really talented wide receiver that Buffalo hasn't had since Lee Evans. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like he was putting up some for Buffalo standards at the time, because they were a moribund franchise, he was putting up some good numbers. I think that year when he was coaching in 2012, Stevie Johnson had 79 catches, 1,046 yards, and 6 touchdowns with Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing him the football. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So and remember, it wasn't like he played every single game, I believe. Like Stevie Johnson came on late out of the blue. So he was a wide receivers assistance coach there in 2012. 2015, he was the Jets quarterback coach. That was the year the Jets went 10-6 with Ryan Fitzpatrick when he threw for 30 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, where they had Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, and all that jazz. So the passing game that he was, at least associated with, that was as good as the Jets have been in a very, very long time at that point.
Ooh.
In 2018, he was the wide receivers coach at Indianapolis. That's when T.Y. Hilton had a bounce back year, and he had like
Oh,
1,300
right.
yards. Right? He had
That's
1,300
right.
yards and 6
See,
touchdowns,
you're
right?
you're
The year before
rejogging
he
my
had a
memory.
down
This
year.
is good stuff.
You know what I'm saying? So like all of a sudden he came into the fray, and T.Y. Hilton's product went up. In 2020, he was a pass game specialist for the Indianapolis Colts. That was when Phillip Rivers was the quarterback. They went to the playoffs, and they were on the verge of beating Buffalo in Buffalo until Michael Pittman dropped a first
Oh.
down catch that would have extended the drive to put them in field goal range at that point or something. So Phillip Rivers was playing really good football, and since then,
Wait, so Patullo coached Michael Pittman in his rookie year?
when was Michael Pittman's rookie year? It had to have been
Was
after 2018, obviously. So I'm going to
look at
assume
Michael
yes.
Pittman.
I'm going to
Yeah.
assume. I'm going to
Well,
assume yes.
I think that Michael Pittman outplayed his draft stock, for instance. I'll tell you that much.
I think Michael
Even
Pittman's a
right
freak.
away.
I think
Yeah.
he's a freak. I think he's a really, really good wide receiver, and people don't put a lot of respect on his name because he's in Indianapolis. If he were
Can I
somewhere else,
tell you, Michael Pittman? You can compare. I'm not going to say his game, but his production in the NFL versus his draft stock to like Amon-Ra St. Brown,
oh wow,
where his draft stock was a lot lower, but his production when he came into the league way, way went above what people expected.
right.
Or maybe you can also say Puka Nacua, similar thing as well.
But
Yeah.
so in that sense, that's fair. That's a very fair comment, actually, because I do believe Michael Pittman
But
gets a
that is
really
what's
bad
important to me
rap.
when I'm talking about, Kevin Patullo. I want to know what role he played in that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So again, I don't know if he was specifically associated with Michael Pittman, but he was coaching with Nick Sirianni, who has a wide receiver coaching background, probably an assistant with him, I'm going to assume. But I'm just going based on the titles that I saw in his coaching tree. And I just know in 2020 he was a pass game specialist for the Colts, which I'm going to assume is the quarterback room, is the wide receiver room, right? It's basically the offensive room kind of designing a game plan there. And then in 2021 and 2022, he was the pass game coordinator in Philadelphia. That's when, Nick Sirianni took on the job. And, we kind of know what happened in 2021. It was first year head coach. We went from 4
That was
wins
the
to 9
Devontae
wins.
Smith's rookie season.
Devontae Smith's rookie year, Jalen Hurts' first year starting, right? And then the year after that was 2022 when we went to the Super Bowl and we had the type of offense that we did with the passing game and how explosive it was, right? So he had his hand in that. And then 2023 and 2024, he was the same passing game coordinator, but he also became an associate head coach in that sense. So we saw what 2023 looked like, not quite the same, but in 2024 we saw the results, right? So he has a track record of majority of his career when he's associated with the operation, he does a pretty good job, or at least it yields some sort of good result. You watch Jacob, you know this. We saw Dan Sileo show the interview with Frank Reich, which was excellent. And Frank
Frank
Reich,
Reich's a legend.
he speaks the world of him, speaks the world of Kevin Patullo, thinks he's going to do a phenomenal job. So I think we have to give Kevin Patullo the chance to go out there and prove that he can actually do the job or that he can't do the job. Do I believe he's the right guy? I don't know. I think it's just a wait to be seen kind of situation. But if it yields any results that some of these other things have done, then I think Philadelphia is going to be pretty happy with Kevin Patullo. He has all the experience that you would want for a guy in the NFL. He has a good tracker, like I said, with improving wide receiver positions, improving passing game, schemes, and helping quarterbacks develop and be better. Like Ryan Fitzpatrick, that was probably the best year of his career, and Kevin Patullo had an intricate
So
part of it.
that's what's impressed to me, because that you've taken the Nick Sirianni part out of it when you're talking about Buffalo, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what I'm saying? So in that sense, you have to look at it and say, hey, he's got a good track record of just being able to at least be functional and being a quality coach in the NFL. Let's just see how he calls a game, because play calling is not necessarily about designing the most intricate plays. You can have that with Kyle Shanahan.
See,
His
that's the
design,
part that makes me nervous. It's the
right?
play calling side of it. The thing is that Kellen Moore, whether we like him or not,
Good play
that
call.
was his thing.
He's a good play
He's an
caller.
excellent play caller. Nick Sirianni, outside of probably the tush push, the only
Not
play that he
necessarily play
probably
caller, right? Yeah,
invented in that entire offense. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
And again, when it comes to play calling, like you said, not that Sirianni doesn't have a feel for the game, but like there's an ebb and flow to an offense where like, hey, I could push this button and it'll get us going. I can dial this back now and this will lead to this result. Shane Steichen, I think, is elite at that. I think Kellen Moore is very close to elite at that. I think he's really good at it. I think there's very few head coaches who have that quality. Like, I don't know if Kyle Shanahan has that quality. I don't. I think he's really good when everything's on schedule and everything's on time. Same with Matt LaFleur. I think he's very good when they're on time, on schedule, and everything's working in the way that they want it to. When they're in rhythm, they're as good as anybody. But when shit hits the fan, when things are sort of out of whack, when the ship is rocky, what is your answer? I think Shane Steichen has an answer. I think Sean McVay has an answer. I think Andy Reid has an answer. You know what I'm saying? I think Kellen Moore.
I think Kellen Moore, yeah.
I think Kellen
His
Moore
answer was
showed,
Saquon.
at least on surface, he has an answer. Sean Payton has an answer. You know what I'm saying? Like, will Kevin Patullo have the answer? Because listen, if you show that you can be a competent coach in Philadelphia as an offensive coordinator, it's a beamline to a head coaching job. It just is. Is he the right man for the job in terms of play calling? I don't know, but you know what? In terms of track record, you got to give the guy the opportunity to at least prove that he can't do it.
Yeah.
So
I think the play calling itself is my only drawback.
And that would be for
in terms of everything else, our answer as well, if the offense struggles, just as it was last year, Vic Fangio coming back. All of our assistants under Vic Fangio in that defense
side of the ball
are all coming back. Christian Parker's coming back. A linebacker coach, what's his name again?
Bobby King.
Bobby King is coming back. Clint Hurt is coming back. Like, there is that. And then as well, on his side of the football, he does still have Jeff Stoutland.
Run game coordinator, 100%. Yep, exactly.
So
again,
and the new passing game coordinator, by the way, happens to be the passing game coordinator of one of the elite passing games in the NFL, being the Miami Dolphins. So the man who's replaced him in that role is...
Yeah, he also had a hand in the cookie jar in one of the more elite passing games, like you said. Again, so that's all, again, not to kind of go back to the topic, but that's also another feather in Sirianni's cap. He puts together a pretty decent coaching staff, and he knows a lot of guys that he can call in to help coach his roster that he has, and it's a valuable asset.
I think that Nick has given...
quality coach, so we got to give him the opportunity.
I think Nick is, now that he's won the Super Bowl, has been given one more F up. If Patullo doesn't work out, I still think that the Eagles can go back in 2026 with a Kellen Moore, some type of prototype.
And again, whether it's a success or not, if it's an absolute failure, 2026 you're going to have a new offensive coordinator, regardless. Doesn't matter.
You think Patullo will be on the head coaching ring if he's great?
If we somehow get back to an NFC title game or to a Super Bowl, 100%. 100%. But if we become an abject failure like we did in 23, the way the team looked overall, whether that's the offense's fault or the defense's fault, there will be a scapegoat, and it's probably going to be him because he's the...
It won't be Vic Fangio, not the Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator.
He's the change, right? So, again, Philadelphia, the fastest track to becoming a head coach, but it's also like, hey, if you mess up here, you are blackballed basically as a coach in the NFL all of a sudden.
It's like being thrown the keys to a Ferrari. Don't crash it.
Yeah, literally, exactly. 100%. And you know what? I think Kevin Patullo, just based on track record, at least doesn't have I don't think he has the capability of crashing the Ferrari. You know what I mean? So, like, again, I'm willing to let him have this be as if I have any power in Philadelphia. I think every Eagle fan should be patient.
I think we actually have more power than you think.
Huh?
I once had a conversation with Lee 500 in the background there, and I told him, and he didn't necessarily shrug me off. I said, you think it's a coincidence that you like push for certain players in the draft on your show, and suddenly Howie ends up with half of those players that you speak about in your pre-draft stuff, or the players that we signed for agency, and I said, I want this guy, and then Howie's some like breaking news. I'm like, I feel like Howie Roseman recently, he listens to Jacob. He watches Feely 500 and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%.
He totally listens to us.
I
think our influence is a lot more than you think.
Right. That's
why these shows are very useful.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think it gives him a pulse of what Philly feels and what they know and how much they know, right? They all know. Like, Philadelphia knows their stuff. Like, you're not going to meet a lot of stupid Eagle fans. You know what I'm saying? Like, most Eagle fans kind of know what's on the up and up when it comes to football and when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. But again, getting back to the question, Kevin Patullo, I think he's got a good track record. I think we just have to let him have the opportunity to coach. And
yeah,
See
Look,
how it went.
I'm still jury's still out on that. I don't think I've got a lot of pressure necessarily on my side on him. I think that again, we are coming off of winning a Super Bowl. I think
Right.
if there was any year that we can breathe a little bit, because I think that's a big part, and we're going to talk about in literally in a second. All the players have been ripped off of our roster,
Yeah.
and what has you know what I mean? I think we need to sort of just take this time in this off season, not panic too much, enjoy this. You know what I mean? We get to you only have a certain amount of time you get to wear the crown as long as we don't extend it next year, which hopefully we do.
Right.
You know what
100%.
I mean? Like enjoy the ride, and I think it's a good time to have a change at that offense coordinator position because you have that little extra bit of leeway. I think we've validated ourselves. Like we know what we're capable of. We can put the Lombardi trophies on the table now, and we know as an organization what we are capable of. If Patullo doesn't necessarily win us this year, that's fine. I still believe we're still in a championship window moving forward. We've got and as we move forward into the next topics now, we've got 20 draft picks in the next 2 years because let's just roll it down. We've got many compensation picks coming up, especially next season. I believe we're going to have 12 picks in next year's draft, 8 in this year's draft, so 20 overall.
Yeah, 20 overall.
So I don't know if I've got the list in front of me. I actually am a bit of a nerd. I've done an off-season guide for all the teams. I don't know if I can share it. It's a bit too much, I think, for everybody. But I could tell you on our roster, and by the way, how I think it it fares in general after everything has fallen apart. So let's talk about the outs first. So out went Darius Slay. So obviously the big veteran leader in our secondary gone, and I think that's nobody's surprise. I think we all expected that.
Yeah, true.
Josh Sweat, I think we also all expected to go. He's now signed with Jonathan Gannon in Arizona. Milton Williams, I think, again, got way overpriced. But I wish him well in New England.
100%.
Again, he's out the building. And then I think those are your main guys, to be honest. I really think it's and then of course the bomb drop that I woke up to one morning and I'm like, CJ Gardner-Johnson's been traded to the Texans, and I'm like,
Right.
no, this is not real. And yeah, so he was out in replacement. By the way, we'll talk about the ins, but he was traded. I think I believe we got a 6 round pick. Was it in this year's draft or next year's draft? This year's draft. And Kenyon Green, who has been a first round right guard who hasn't necessarily panned out at Houston so far, to put it lightly.
Right.
Oh, and of course the big one, other big one that went out is Mekhi Becton, who was the the huge, massive rock in the
Right.
middle of our O-line, who's also gone. The rest of them, I think, are just very interchangeable outside of BG, who retired. But I think, again, I'm not worried about that, given the way that our defense played without him leading up to the Super Bowl. I don't think he made much of an impact in the Super Bowl himself. So I actually think that it's not much of a loss anymore in hindsight,
Who, Brandon
given what
Graham?
we've seen. I mean, overall, in his entire career, obviously he's a legend. He's one of our best defensive
No,
linemen
but
ever.
you're talking specifically Brandon Graham and his, from the second half of the year on, you're saying it wasn't much of a.
Like, as in, he's going to be gone for now. I felt that he was gone the minute he left the Rams game. I think
Okay.
him playing in the
Okay,
Super
no,
Bowl was a bit of a
I just wanted to
bonus.
clarify. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, the rest of them all went out. Isaiah Rogers, he was our fourth cornerback. He's going to get to be a starter in Minnesota. Kenny Gainwell, I actually think we upgrade in that position, actually, in my opinion, as we'll talk about the incomings. Avante Maddox, again, I think he's been well replaced with Cooper DeJean. I wouldn't say that we're
Yeah.
going to be missing him that much. Chris Campbell, I don't think was much of a factor at all in our offense last year. Oren Burks was an important piece. He's gone, went to Cincinnati. He was an important piece in terms of our playoff run, stepping in when Nakobe Dean was hurt. So he does leave some sort of a void as long as there are question marks on the health of Nakobe starting in the next of the year. The other one was a quarterback swap in trades. We traded Kenny Pickett to Cleveland, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who actually is, I think he's as a third string quarterback, which I believe would be. He's a nice compliment, I think, to what we've got in our quarterback room. Fred Johnson, who stepped in for a few important games, especially when Mailata was out. He's gone to Jacksonville. And yeah, and that's our big, as Dan Sealer would say, our blowtorch that was taken to our defense. Those are all the outgoings. Yeah, so how do you feel? I know we'll talk about maybe. Do you want me to talk about the incomings first then?
I mean, you could name them
Let's talk
all.
about the
Just
departures. Let's talk about the
sure.
departures for now. So, how do you feel about the Eagles roster this season, or how big of a subtraction do you believe those men were from our roster in terms of us moving forward and our ability to contend?
I'll say that there are some players who I think you named that really make big impact on what made this team the Super Bowl contender and the Super Bowl champions. Darius Slay, I mean, he's as good as any quarterback in the National Football League when you're playing a zone scheme. He still can keep up with anybody in football. Isaiah Rodgers played a pivotal role in what we did on defense. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, again, a tough loss, but there are other reasons why they got rid of him, and I can respect that from an organizational standpoint.
I think from a roster building standpoint, it's a bit of a head scratcher, though. Would you say?
Sure, but again, it's not just the roster that you're dealing with when it comes to team building, right? And like you're dealing
Right.
with personalities, you're dealing with like, other factors kind of play a role, I think. And again, this is probably something that Vic Fangio was like, hey, I could probably do without this. So we got to give him the benefit of the doubt in that sense. And then you got Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, who I think are pretty huge losses considering the type of defensive line rotation we have in Philadelphia. Now I know, people think that Milton Williams got overpaid in New England, and maybe he did, but that's not his fault. That's the market. And they were willing to throw $26 million at him, so that's what they valued him at. $26 million per. And I think Milton Williams, outside of Jalen Carter, was probably the second best defensive lineman on our team. Right? I think he was
No,
better.
actually, I think that's undeniable.
You know what I'm saying? I think he's
Yeah.
excellent. So and then Josh Sweat, again, set the edge, played good ball, played within the scheme, a veteran presence, been there, done that type of attitude, right? Like it's a young group that we lost. I mean, lost two veterans, and you're replacing him with Jordan Davis, who hasn't shown to necessarily be a guy that you could
I don't
play
even
through
think
young.
that though. I
And I
actually
don't
don't
even
even
know
think
that.
that. I think it's Moro Jomo.
And again, seventh round kid.
Right.
But listen, again, that's why I'm not 100% sure the that this year is going to be our year. Like we lost a lot on this defensive side of the ball. Now we're gonna see what he does in the draft, and maybe all of a sudden, if those rookie picks pan out, it kind of just justifies itself. And again, I know we have other key pieces that we brought in, like Josh Uche, Azeez Ojulari, like a lot of veteran places that have been brought in to replace some of those guys, but. It is tough to replace Milton Williams. It is tough to replace Josh Sweat and think that you're going to come out and be just fine on defense. And I know most of the pieces are intact and the young core is intact, but like you said, Oren Burks is gone, pivotal in our playoff run. Milton Williams is gone, second best defensive lineman in Philadelphia last year. And you could play all over the defensive line. Not many guys are versatile like Milton Williams. Josh Sweat set the edge so that you couldn't run on the outside every single play.
I
You know
think
what I mean?
I think what people are overlooking about the Josh Sweat subtraction, regardless of, and we'll talk about the guys we tried to bring in. We brought in kind of like a bunch of guys to try to rotate in on that. But I think a lot of people are putting a lot of pressure on Nolan Smith now. I think a lot of people realize that Nolan Smith, his production, especially in the postseason and in Brian Graham's absence, was also part of the fact that he wasn't the main guy that people worried about blocking from on the edge. He was number two, correct. So it changes the dynamic of
Yeah,
what
and that
we look like on defense.
100%, because now people got to take on extra snaps. And we already saw what happened when Bryce Huff tried to take on extra snaps. How it completely changed the way that he plays football. It's not just so easy. Like, oh yeah, we got the next man up. We could just plug them in and it'll be cool. Like, no, there's a rhyme and a reason for why the roster was built the way it was. And why it worked out the way it did. It's because everybody had a role and they played their significant role. Like, do I believe Moro Ojomo is going to step in and put up the same production Milton Williams did? No, I don't. I think he'll be okay. I think he's a good player
To
for
be
the value
honest,
we got him at.
if it was up to me, Norajama runs his exact same role next year because, like, we'll talk about the draft in a second, but that's where I believe that we need to be putting our draft chips in. I want a starter on the defensive line now, whether it's round one or round two, because I still think there's some good ones in round two. But more specifically, I'd like to see it be round one. But again, it's not up to us because we're sitting at 32. Unless, of course, Howie has identified somebody and he's willing to stack his 20 draft picks in the next 2 years chips in to make sure he gets somebody. The only issue is, as we'll talk about later, this draft isn't necessarily the strongest. So that's the
No,
only
not a
issue that
lot
we've
of
got.
blue chippers in this draft, not a lot of super
Yeah,
elite players in this draft per se, but 20 picks is 20 picks. It's a lot of draft picks.
yeah,
So do I believe that again, I don't want to deviate too much, but I do believe
yeah.
he's going to
We'll
trade
get
up
there.
in this draft. I do believe he's going to package a lot to trade up into this draft to at least get one key player and then have picks on the back end for 2026, because I think that's the draft they're really looking at.
Yeah. And that's the thing we need to keep in mind, though, because I think one thing we should learn from Howie. Do you remember the Devontae Smith draft?
Mhm.
And we were sitting, I believe, at the start, we were sitting at the fifth
Yeah,
pick or sixth pick at the start, like after the Washington game, right? I
right.
believe we were at the fifth pick, but we traded back. That was all part of the whole movement that eventually got Trey Lance to San Francisco because we traded back with Miami, and then later on, of course, we traded back with New Orleans. That was that season. Yeah, correct. That was the same. We did two trade backs. I believe was it the New
Yeah,
Orleans one?
Yeah, I feel like we traded back a couple of times because we ended up taking Devontae at like what 10 or 9 or something like that. So, um,
Yeah. But
regardless,
anyway,
yeah, how are we
regardless,
moving back?
we
Yeah,
moved back, and in turn, we ended up in following seasons with AJ Brown, the ability to get him in a trade, the
yeah,
ability to draft Jalen Carter, even though we were just coming off of the damn Super Bowl, right? Being in the Super Bowl, and we're still able to draft probably the best prospect in
in
that
that draft.
draft.
Yeah, 100%.
That's by us being able to be patient. Like sometimes the class now is always like shining because it's the people you can
It's
bring
what's
in
in front of you.
immediately,
Yeah, it's what's in front of
and
you.
you see it. But without us being able to defer, by the way, there's no Cooper DeJean in Philadelphia. Again, there's no AJ Brown in Philadelphia. There's no Jalen Carter in Philadelphia. So I believe that Howie has always shown an ability to kick the can down the road and for it to be to our benefit. Okay, maybe we might not win the Super Bowl this year, but we'll be able to be stable. We're not going to fall off the face of the map. I believe this roster is going to be stronger. We have a potential with the way Howie's moved in this offseason. I know it sounds crazy now for it to make us a better roster, maybe not in 2025, but in 2026, 2027 than
Hmm.
we are now. And not just that, in 2026, 2027, when we've got, you know, Jalen Carter's contracts coming up, depending on if we pick up the fifth-year option on Jordan Davis, his contract will be coming up. We're going to have to talk about, as I said, Cooper, Quinion. We have an opportunity now to keep our roster long term at the young cores where we're not losing Milton Williamses and Josh Sweats in free agencies after winning Super Bowls. We'll be able to win Super Bowls, I mean, I will see what happens, and maintain the bulk part of our important influences in our roster. I think people don't understand that is one of the reasons why we've allowed, as you said, a Milton Williams, who was so important, to walk out the building. I think we're just not quite seeing it, but I think it's important to realize that this team has already shown you that patience is a virtue. And it's not long term patience, it's very short term patience. You know what I mean? We're talking 12 months down the road. And next year, we might end up having a big time, addition as well as being able to lock up our guys.
True that. True that. Again, I think they don't look at it year to year. They look at it in like 3 to 5 year chunks of how to build a roster. And that's kind of evident based on the ups and downs that this team goes through under the Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie era. You already said it before. It's been 2 or 3 times that Howie Roseman has built a Super Bowl caliber team. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think a lot of that's by design, like you mentioned. You sign a lot of 1 year, you plug and play a lot of guys, sign a lot of 1 year veterans. If you hit lightning in the bottle, great. Now you get a little bit of cachet. Then you have to push off contracts and you try to build and develop and you offload bad contracts. So you do that. That's your downslope. And then all of a sudden you hit on a few draft picks. Now you have a 3 to 5 year window where your rookie class, your draft class, helps you to an ultimate goal of winning a championship. And now you got another, X amount of time here where you have to offload contracts and the cycle continues over and over and over again. So again, as much as the departures suck, there's reason behind it, like you said. And I think even some of the people he brought in, there's reason behind that too. And we just have to I think everyone needs to just see what it looks like after the draft and before the preseason games start, because that's when all the roster moves get made. That's when
Yeah.
every single transaction, and you'll have a better idea of what this team's going to look like at that point, because this team is never quite done with roster acquisition until you can't make any more for the year. They're always in play, they're always in the hunt, they're always on the lookout. So, the departures suck, but like you
Yeah.
said,
I actually think in a moment we'll go through a bit of an exercise here. There's actually, ironically, something that Dan Cilio did on his show to do the opposite effect of what I'm doing, but I'm actually going to take something that he did. I actually thought was cool because I was actually listening to one of his shows while I was on a jog, and I was actually pausing it in my mind and answering his question, and then kind of thinking about it a different way. But we'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about the additions, and then we'll talk about how we think this offseason goes moving forward via that exercise. As you know, we've mentioned Jacob before and just now, as Johnny Mack would call it, the Timu offseason then kicked off for the Eagles. Not so Timu though was the first big piece of business that we did in retaining Zach Bond. Okay, I just wanted, before we get into anything else, highlight how important that is to you.
you showed that when somebody does something special for Philadelphia as an Eagle, despite how you've evaluated that position in the past, you'll reward them. And you show everybody else in the NFL, like, hey, if you come in, no matter what background that you have, no matter what your journey looks like in the NFL, if you come and produce in Philadelphia at an elite level, we'll reward you. And you make it a desirable place to play. So retaining Zach Bond at the price that we kept him at, we kept him for Patrick Queen money. You know what I mean? So like that's pretty much that's a very good deal for
You know what's
Philadelphia.
very interesting? A year ago, everyone was losing their minds that we didn't go after Patrick Queen.
I did too. I did too. I'm not gonna lie. I was one of those people as well. I thought we needed linebacker help, and we did. We just ended up getting it in Zach Bond, and who ended up just overplaying that contract. We got him for 3.5 mil. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like nobody expected him to come out and play the way he did. Not even the Eagles organization. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that he did that, you reward him for the play that you just got. You don't care about necessarily what you're getting in the future with him. So
I think as well, and of course, I want to move on to the additions, but I want to outline the fact how important it is in terms from the way our defense is. Knowing that we were going to lose the pieces that we did, you've still maintained the spine of your defense. So you're going to have the Jalen Carters and Jordan Davises, and right behind that you have the Zach Bond, which kind of creates that foundation. Like when you're building a building, you know what I mean? You start with not even the ground floor, but below that, the basement first, the foundation. And I
right,
think that Zach Bond, along with, I said, Jalen Carter, is a foundation that you can build upon. I would actually go into three levels of the defense. Right? You go, your D line, you got to have a star. I think you got that in Jalen Carter. Your linebacking core, you got a star. I think you need that. You have that now in Zach Bond. And then moving into the secondary, I think you've got, Cooper, DeJean, and Quinion Mitchell, I think are both going to be elite secondary pieces as their careers move forward. Right? So as long as you got those kind of chips lined up, and then who knows what Jeremiah Trotter becomes as a player? Who knows what Kitty Ringo becomes as a player? Like I think Jordan Davis has got one more shot to prove that he's got something before it's time to quit or stay. You know what I mean? I think this is his last shot here. But I think it's important. I think when you have the defensive coordinator that you have, that you at least keep that, because I think if Zach Bond goes and we lose all those other pieces,
yeah, you're in trouble.
I'm
You're in
feeling
trouble.
we're fucked.
Yeah, you're in deep, deep trouble. 100%.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so this was the Timu offseason.
Mm-hmm.
AJ Dillon comes in. As I said to you earlier, I think it's an upgrade. I actually
I
think
do.
that AJ Dillon complements Saquon Barkley very, very well. Because what's Saquon's biggest weakness, and that's goal line scoring from within the 2 to the 1 yard line. Actually, I know we were talking about the stat about the tush push, but there were many times where Saquon did get the carry inside the 2, and he never got in. I'm trying to remember. Maybe I don't know. It's too hard just off the back of my mind. Like, did he score one touchdown at all from 2 yards in?
I mean, if it were, he probably only maybe it's one or two, if anything. I don't recall. A lot
Yeah,
of his runs were, long home run type touchdowns. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think
That's
it's
sets for
maybe
me.
a couple. You know,
What I love about AJ Dillon in this scenario here is that we've got the best 20 to 20 running back in the NFL, I believe, today. You know what I
hmm
mean?
okay,
And now we're going to add in a guy who is dangerous from the 20 and in. I actually think it's a better compliment to AJ Dillon. And I know I've heard other people completely say the opposite. But I think it's a better compliment to Saquon AJ Dillon than Kenny Gainwell because I also think that Kenny Gainwell also was a 20 to 20 type of running back who also wasn't that good in the red zone, even though we gave him the red zone responsibilities. I just think his frame was way too slight and his game was way too similar to Barkley, being a receiving type threat as well. You know what I mean? Like, you get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Shipley is also a Kenny Gainwell similar type of prototype. So I think we needed an AJ Dillon type of player. I actually think of all of the signings, this one to feel like to me didn't feel Timu. You know what I mean?
Wow. I'm in the camp of I did not like the signing at all. I thought
Really?
I don't
Okay.
yeah, I don't think AJ Dillon is a very good football player. That's just my opinion.
Really?
Yeah, I know again, I have a friend who is a Packers fan, so I'm just kind of like going based on like what he talks about and just what I've seen watching him. He presents as like the 220, 230-pound bulldozer that you can use him in like cold weather games and goal line situations. But more often than not, this guy is dancing and sidestepping and avoiding contact more than he
But
probably
that's what
should.
I'm saying, though. I don't think that's the role that he's necessarily designed to do in Philadelphia. I don't
And
think that is.
I guess my point is he was asked to do the same very role of being a downhill runner in Green Bay, and he was not very good at that
Mm.
because you know what I'm saying? Like there's a reason why Aaron Jones was in those situations more often than not. It's because AJ Dillon I don't think is capable of being a bulldozing back because
I
I
mean,
don't
look, I've had Aaron Jones on my fantasy team a few seasons, and in those years, I was getting incredibly frustrated by the fact that AJ Dillon was sniping my touchdowns. So
Right.
I lived it in a different sort of way. Maybe I was looking at it through that fantasy football sort of lens. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, again, look, you might be right in terms of goal line carries. Like, again, I'm not gonna say that
That's all
AJ
that matters
Dillon,
to me.
which is
Honestly,
fair.
when
And
I'm
again, that's
talking
also
about, that's all that
fair.
matters to me.
That's fair, and that's fair. I just also think that like, I would have much rather drafted a guy later in the rounds and get like a
I
guy.
don't know if I like any of these guys. I mean, you got
Listen,
Genty and Hampton, but I
you're
don't think they
asking them to
fit
do
into
one
what.
thing. You're asking them to do one thing, and that's just get goal line touchdowns. If that's the case, I think a lot of running backs who are eligible for an NFL draft can do that, and you can have them for 3 to 5 years without having to pay them a lot of money. And I think again, AJ Dillon was only a million, so like, who am I? Like, like who
Right.
cares? It's
That's what I'm
only a million.
saying. Look at
If it
the
works out,
price
it
you
works
pay.
out. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? Like, but I'm not like enthralled by AJ Dillon by any means. I'm glad to be proven wrong. If he comes in and gives you 6 to 7 touchdowns on goal line carries, I'll take it. You know what I mean? I'll 100% take it. So, that's just my AJ Dillon take. But again, that's just one of the many signings that Howie did. You know,
Correct.
we'll kind of just see how it all works out in the end.
Yeah. And so speaking about many other, I reckon on the defenses we're talking about that was ripped apart. Surprisingly enough, he's actually only brought in four additions on defense. Three of them are all on the same position. So one of them I wouldn't call Patrick Johnson was a reunion. I'll skip over that quickly, but I don't think he's going to be on the roster when time comes. But Joshua Uche, I don't know how you pronounce it. Ash Uche was brought in. Quickly on that, I thought he was a really good player under Bill Belichick. Going a couple of years back, I thought he was a very productive player in New England. I don't necessarily know what happened when he was traded to Kansas City. He was having a tough year to begin with at the start of last
Yeah.
year. Again, the first year without Bill. But when he was in Kansas City, he was sort of like Kansas City's version of Bryce Huff. You know what
Right.
I mean? Didn't really factor at all as it went, even though they made a traded a draft pick to get him. Aziz Ojolari, I think, is a key one. I think this could be the Zach Bond move of the summer. I think that coming in to the NFL as a second round pick to the Giants, I actually thought he was going to be a really good pass rusher. I just don't think he ever was in the right situation. So that's one to keep an eye on because he's still only 24 years old. And I think this is the guy that, if anybody is going to fix, I think it could be Vic Fangio. And then, of course, the last addition, which I think is the best addition, I think, overall of all the free agents we brought in, which is Adoree Jackson, who I think is going to fill in as the second outside corner, allowing us to retain Cooper DeJean in the slot. So what are your overall thoughts on these defensive additions overall? Does this stop you from going after a pass rusher in the draft? Uh, you know, does it stop you from, looking for help maybe at a long-term partner to Quinyon Mitchell on the other side now that Darius Slay is gone? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess with Josh Uche, I think there's no coincidence that Bill Belichick of all coaches was the one to be able to get 10 plus sacks out of him. It's the greatest coach in the history of football and the greatest defensive mind the NFL has ever seen. So, do I think Josh Uche has the talent as a pass rusher? I do. I think he does need to be in a rotation, but I think you'll be pretty hard pressed to find a lot of production coming from him this season. Again, I'm not poo-pooing the signing because I think it's a smart risk, low risk, high reward type signing. So kudos to the Howie Roseman and this organization for doing that. I think, like you said, Ojulari might play a little bit more of a key role in this than maybe people let on. He has pass rushing skills. He has the ability to get to the quarterback, and whether or not he's very good against the run kind of just remains to be seen. He was on the New York Giants after all, and they kind of believe that, hey, if you surround talented players with other talented players, let's just see how their talent matches up with anybody else in the NFL, right? That's kind of how Philadelphia operates. So Ojulari might be one, like you said, is an interesting one to keep an eye on because he actually might pop a little bit more than people want to give credit for. And as far as Adoree Jackson goes, I do like the idea of having him as a veteran presence in the room. I think he gives a good opportunity for Keely Ringo to compete for the job. And if
Yeah, I
Keely
think
Ringo,
that's what he's there for. Yeah.
right, and if Keely Ringo beats him out, then you feel pretty good about Keely Ringo saying like, hey, he beat out a veteran who's been in the NFL for 9 years, has played a lot of good football, a former, high draft pick, right? Like Adoree Jackson's no scrub by any means. And worst case scenario, he becomes cornerback two, you have cornerback two. Or maybe he gets put in the slot and you put Cooper DeJean outside, whatever the case may be. So the signings that they've made, while they're not knock your socks off type signings, each one of them has a purpose on this team. And I think that's kind of what makes this offseason so interesting with Howie and some of the additions that he's made. They weren't splash signings, not a lot of splash moves outside of departures. So would that deter me from drafting an edge in the NFL draft? No, I would go for a defensive lineman in the NFL draft. I wouldn't mind if they ended up drafting an offensive tackle or an offensive guard in the NFL draft.
See, that's where it gets interesting to me when we get to that subject. Is like
Because
you only have a certain amount of top, maybe first to third round picks that I think are the rounds where you expect players to be starter level.
right,
There's only a few amount of, you have to kind of pick your poison. Like we're going to talk about Dallas Goedert in a second, but if you're going to throw tight end in there to try to replace him, then it makes, you know what I mean? It's like some of these Timu guys are going to make it because it gives them flexibility to be able to go and get the best possible thing he can get,
right.
regardless if it's DT or edge or tight end or safety. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's part of the reason why they have gone about the offseason the way that they've had. I think we can't look at what they've done up to this point now and give them a grade on their offseason because they don't look at the offseason in segments. They look at it as the whole offseason in terms of roster acquisition and roster building. Don't look at it like, okay, this is the free agency period. What do we do here? This is the draft period. What do we do here? This is OTAs. What do we do here? And this is pre. They don't look at it like that, like a lot of teams do. That's not how Philadelphia operates. I did an episode on my show where I tried giving Howie an offseason grade.
I watched
I
that.
gave him an incomplete. I gave him an
Yeah.
incomplete because it is incomplete the way that they build their roster. You have to wait till the draft rolls out the way it does because we may go into this draft, we trade out of the first round pick, and we end up getting a defensive tackle and a defensive end that kind of rounds out this pass rushing unit. Or we end up moving up in the draft and getting an elite defensive lineman that helps bring a little more star power to the defensive line room. Or we get an offensive tackle that ends up being a guard or potentially a Lane Johnson replacement in the next year or two. And we all look at back at it and say, wow, what a smart pick that was. Or we get a first round cornerback. Like there's a lot of things he can do with this
Did you
pick.
say first round quarterback?
Okay, a first round cornerback. Cornerback. No. Yeah. So you get my point. Like there's a lot of things that he can do here. We just have to wait and see. And I think, like you said, each signing here has purpose. It's calculated. There's reason behind it. And I think we just kind of have to let it play out because they've earned the equity and they've earned the leeway to let things play out the way they need to play out. Right? So we can't be too critical of them thus far. But overall, I do like a lot of the veteran signings. I do like what they've done in the offseason thus far. I think most of the decisions have been correct. We'll kind of see how it plays out once OTAs and the preseason time begins.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly just wrap up some of the offensive side of the ball additions. I don't think we need to talk about it too much because I don't think a lot of them are very noteworthy.
No.
Except for the fact that we brought in Harrison Bryant and Kylan Granson to kind of fill up that tight end room, and the ability maybe for them to move on to Dallas Goedert. However, I just gotta say personally, as much as a lot of people are planning on him leaving, my personal preference would not be to do so.
Mhm.
That would be my personal preference because I just think it allows you, while you have an, let's be honest, a top 10, top five to top 10 tight end in the room at the moment, given all the other losses that we've made, it allows you then to focus on draft the players that we need to on defense, if that makes sense. I think if we're looking at, first round or second round tight ends, I feel like maybe in a necessity, if they're going to do that, I feel like I had to do it. But it's not necessarily if I had the option, I would want to do it. But the other things I'd say is so on offense, Terrace Marshall Jr., that's the most recent acquisition. Again, a second round pick, a lot of upside, never has really shown anything in the pro level at all, I believe.
Mm.
But the offensive line signings I've actually liked. I think Kendall Lamb is an upgrade on Fred Johnson. I'm sorry. Kendall Lamb has been a 10-year starter in the NFL. Fred Johnson cannot claim that at all. He plays both sides swing tackle. I think he's a very good addition to us. And we brought in Matt Pryor, who former Eagle, who I think has actually gotten better since he's been gone. He was also a starter level guard. So again, it draft proofs the roster. It doesn't put a lot of pressure on us to need to bring in a guard in the draft, given that as well. We got Tyler Steen and Trevor Keegan, who we've invested draft capital in the last 2 seasons as well. And of course, then finally brought in Avery Williams as basically a fourth running back, but he's going to be a kick return specialist, which,
Mm.
and currently Britton Covey is an unrestricted free agent that would almost ensure that he will not be coming back. And then, of course, we brought in the long snapper as well, Hewlett from the Browns. So that is our additions so far. I don't think you really have much to comment, but let's talk about the Dallas Goedert part of it all,
Mhm.
and bring it back to that. And what are your thoughts about the idea of potentially moving him on? Are you for it? Are are you a bit nervous about that? Like, tell me your feelings on that, or maybe have you come to grips with the reality that is something that's going to happen and you've already moved on?
So I guess maybe I'll rephrase the question and combine it with some of the key
Yeah,
departures. Is losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, Oren Burks, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, and Dallas Goedert worth keeping guys like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Reed Blankenship, and maybe Cooper DeJean down the road? It's totally worth that sacrifice. And maybe even a guy like Cam Jurgens to keep him around. Yes, it's worth
right.
the sacrifice. So,
Okay.
and I think as great as Dallas Goedert has been for Philadelphia, and he's excellent, he's a top 2 or 3 tight end in my opinion. I get that he has an injury history, but it's because he's so physical and he's such a, bruising player. But he's $12 million. It's a lot of money for a position that, again, you can look at it this past season. And I know he was key in our playoff run, but during the regular season, what do you have, like 400 yards, if that, receiving? And I know he's a good blocker, but, if all of a sudden our running game falters because Dallas Goedert is not in the room, then we got bigger problems. You know what I'm saying? So, and in terms of pass catchers, again, Calcaterra is not a scrub. Kyle Granson, not a scrub in terms of pass catching. He's actually a quality pass catcher as a talent. And I know this because, my friend is a Colts fan who also does like the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. He does good work over there, but he speaks highly of Kyle Granson because I asked him like, what are his thoughts about him? He likes him. He thinks he's a really solid player, a reliable pass catcher. Again, you're not looking for him to be a run blocker here. You're not looking for the tight end right now to be a run blocker in Philadelphia. You're looking for them to be like reliable pass catchers and be able to kind of supplement what you do with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside and what you can do with Saquon Barkley. So is Dallas Goedert worth 12 million when he's 100% healthy? Yes, but at the same time, he's not worth the $12 million if it means I'm going to be handicapped to pay guys like Carter, Davis, Reed Blankenship, and other guys down the road, and Cam
Right.
Jurgens. So,
But this would be my follow-up question on that, though. Like in terms of it, he'll be a free agent at the end of the year, regardless, right? He's got 1 year to go on his contract, whether we agree to it or not. Maybe we do need to draft. I think maybe we do need to draft a tight end. Maybe we do. Maybe regardless if he stays or not, we need to draft him because for me, we trade him now. By the way, it's a hit on the cap. So we're actually before June 1, we trade him. We lose money out of the deal, right? In terms of our cap space. I'd rather keep him for a year, maybe draft a tight end, let that tight end learn behind him, and let him be able to step in like some of the guys are ready to step in now in our roster. You know what I mean? In a year's time, rather than I feel nervous about the idea of either for sure having a Harrison Bryant or Kylan Granson being a starting tight end in Philadelphia, but also rather we'll talk about the draft guys later. Like most likely, it will probably would be I would imagine one of Arroyo from Miami, Mason Taylor, uh, probably the guy from Bowling Green, and in Gunnar Helm or Terrence Ferguson. Will be one of those four or five tight ends. One of them will probably be an Eagle, most likely, right? Do you feel confident them as a first year starter without any mentorship whatsoever?
No, but I also just think tight end is one of those positions that you're not going to get a good tight end at first. Like, it's a rarity. Think about how many good tight ends are there in the NFL. You could name a few off the top of your head, but George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts is there, TJ Hockenson, Dallas Goedert's there, Brock Bowers.
Well, Brock Bowers is a first round slam dunk. Like the
Right,
guys
no,
we're dipping in the pool of are not. You know what I'm
no,
saying?
and I get that. And I guess what I'm saying is like, now this might be going a little bit offhand on the topic, but like
No,
we've
go
talked
for it.
about it before. Like, is 2025 the year that Philadelphia wants to go 100% all in to win a Super Bowl? No. So what does it matter?
Right.
Why stress over something if like a majority of us feel that like we're not necessarily trying to optimize our window for 2025, but we're trying to optimize 2026, 7, and 8, So like if it means like we have to have a subpar year in terms of, not getting to the Super Bowl,
I
but
mean,
maybe we,
subpar. I mean, you still got Saquon Barkley, Devontae
yeah.
Smith, AJ Brown in your
Again,
offense.
it ain't like the roof is caving in on this team. You know what I mean? Like you're still gonna be an 10 to an 11 win team with the schedules and all the stuff that's been going on. The teams that we got to play, the road games that we're gonna have to play because it's the gauntlet. Does Dallas Goedert being on this team, will that change the outcome of our
We'll probably
season?
miss about 5 to 6 weeks in the season
He's
anyway.
going to miss, exactly. He's going to miss a chunk of the season anyway. And how many games is he going to win us? Maybe one? Again, that's valuable for an
But
NFL player to
again,
be able to change one game.
in my plan here, he misses a chunk of games. I'm going to put in enter name. Let's say he's got Mason Taylor comes off the bench in his rookie season and plays after having learned a little bit from Dallas Goedert and comes in emergency and he just takes the reins and we're not even worried about Goddard. Mason Taylor has played so well in the down the stretch with the Birds. I feel more comfortable in that position.
I guess how much could a guy learn in X amount of weeks behind Dallas Goedert that he wouldn't learn just by playing the game itself? And he has other veterans in the room. It's not
I think
like,
the NFL learning how to play tight end in the NFL level versus at the college level is a big
yeah, of
deal.
course, there's a transition period. It's always going to be
Like
a transition
James
period, no matter
Harden and
whether or
Fletcher
not you're sitting
Cox.
behind a guy. No matter whether or not you're sitting behind a guy, is my point. Unless you're Brock Bowers, because the guy's a freak of nature. Same with a guy like Kyle Pitts. He just hasn't had a quarterback that's been able to get him the
Those
ball.
are first
He's
rounders. Again, as I'm saying, like
okay. I totally agree with you, but I'm just trying to name you tight ends who are like quality names. Like, so for example, if Philadelphia offloads Dallas Goedert, but they trade with the Raiders and get Michael Mayer, are you going to be in the same position? Like, it's not like you're in a complete,
mm,
situation where you're completely barren at tight end. No, you'll have him for like again, assuming you trade for a guy like Michael Mayer, you would have a guy like Michael Mayer, Kyle Granson who's a quality player, Harrison Bryant who has had a moment in the NFL or two when he spurred onto the scene in Cleveland where he had a good 3-4 game
mm.
stretch where he was leading the league in touchdowns
Yeah, when
and he was a
Njoku
good
was
blocker.
injured, you had the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like it's not like Philadelphia uses the tight. It's not like Jalen Hurts uses the tight end all that often to get the passing game going. And what
yeah.
he's doing over there, you're running the ball or you're throwing it to Devontae or AJ. That's what you're gonna do. Those are your options. And then Dallas Goedert's like the fourth or fifth guy in the option anyway.
Yeah.
What difference does it make if it's him versus a guy like Granson or a guy
I
like
think
Mayer
for
or a
me
guy like
it's
Bryant? And I know it's the blocking aspect too,
yeah,
but you know
correct.
what?
Yeah.
But you know what? At that point, play with 6 freaking offensive tackles and just run the ball down people's throats. Like, I don't care, to be honest with you. If he's only out there to be a blocker at that point, why pay $12 million for that? You know? Like, why do that? So I've come to grips with the idea of losing Dallas Goedert. I think most people have. I think they're just waiting until the draft to probably trade with somebody. I think it might be the Colts. You know what I'm saying? I think they might trade for him for like a 4th-round pick or something like that to move up in the draft just to have something.
The
And
only
then,
thing is that I don't think that moving up in the draft using Dallas Goedert works for us financially. Like we
oh,
can
you're
use
saying,
Dallas Goedert
well,
to
okay. So
yeah.
I guess so. Let me. I guess my question for you is, what is the penalty post June 1 versus pre June 1?
Okay, let's look that up actually.
You know what I'm saying? Because like I think if regardless you have to pay the guy money anyway. You know what I mean? Like whether you pay him $12 million or you have to pay him $8 million, like what difference does it make if it means you're getting a 4th-round pick out of it and potentially a player that can help either that you can use to
Okay,
pack?
here's your answer. By the way, I
Yeah,
absolutely love Google AI. It's like I just ask it questions and it just gives me the answer. It's the
true.
best. So it says cutting or trading Dallas Goedert prior to June 1st would cost the Eagles $9.5 million against the cap, while post June 1st would save 4.1. So we're actually looking at about $13.6 million in the difference. So you're talking about 12 million, you would be losing 13.6 overall.
Okay, right. So in the end, you're only losing $1 million,
No,
right?
you're
If
not
you
because
No, you're
if
saying
you
if you keep him, you have to pay him 12 anyway, right?
right.
So if you cut him, you have to pay 13 million on top of that? No, you have to pay 13 million anyway. So what difference does it make? It's 1 million.
What difference it makes? What difference it makes is when we're looking at 2026 offseason, when Dallas Goedert costs you zero because he's playing for someone else, right? And you also have the 13.6 that you've acquired from being able to trade him prior to it. So it's still going to be a $13.6 million loss. So wait, that's where are we thinking about view about it differently? For me, if
Okay,
Goddard
but
plays
you're
12
talking, so
million this year,
it's almost acting like a void year, essentially, is what you're saying. Okay, I got you. Okay, I didn't realize it was a loss in 26 that you were talking about. Okay,
no,
so again, but regardless, he's going to be gone, is my point.
right?
Whether it's pre June 6 or after June 6, he's not going to be starting tight end for Philadelphia by week 1, I don't believe. I
Yeah.
think they're going to make a move for a tight end, whether it's maybe hell, maybe they may package picks to move up in the draft to get a guy like Tyler Warren if he somehow falls past the Jets pick. You know what I'm saying? So,
I don't know
I
about
don't
that.
look.
I'll
I
show you
don't.
my mock draft later. I don't have him anywhere near
Again,
falling down the
I don't
draft.
think he's going to get past the New York Jets either. But if somehow the Jets do Jets things and he's there, you better believe that they're going to try to do every damn thing to move up in the freaking draft to get a guy like that.
Mm.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? And even if it's not him, maybe it is a Colson Loveland, or you know what? Maybe you don't even trade for any of the
Well,
guys in
that's
the
the
draft
knock-on
class,
effect,
and you
though,
get
right?
Michael Mayer or
But
something like that.
that's the knock-on effect here, right? If Warren falls, let's say, to 14, where I think Colson Loveland will go to the Indianapolis, Colson Loveland gets knocked down the draft board.
Yeah,
So
right, exactly.
then
It
yeah.
becomes an effect at that point, right? So then, I guess my point being is that I think right now Philadelphia views the tight end position as inconsequential. You know what I mean? And whether or not it's pre or post June 1, he ain't gonna be there by the time the regular season starts. And
Yeah.
their contingency plan is we're going to do it by committee, or they're going to bring in a player like a Michael Mayer or somebody of that caliber, maybe a Dawson, maybe like a Dawson
Dawson
Knox.
Knox is not a bad shot, by the way,
Okay,
because they're in a similar position like we were with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goddard, where they've got a really good young tight end,
yeah, Kincaid. He was a what,
Kincaid.
a first, second round
Right.
draft pick or something like that. So again, there's plenty of options out there that you can go after that could do a lot of what Goddard did. Dallas Goddard, again, an elite tight end, but you weren't asking him to do elite things for you. He was just elite because when he does have the ball in his hands, he can make guys miss. But like, it's not like you were losing a step with him and Calcaterra. You know what I mean? Like, you just couldn't run the ball towards Calcaterra's side when Dallas Goedert wasn't out there. But you know what I can do? I can run it behind Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata and run it behind Cam Jurgens. Like, I can do that. That's just fine by me. You know what I'm saying? So, in that sense, uh, he's basically as good as gone in my opinion. So I don't know. Really doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on, and we're gonna head into the draft, and that will be our final kind of segment of the show. But as we dig into the draft, but first, let's play a little bit of a game here. Let's put our GM hat here. We're now Howie Roseman. So Dan Sileo did this on his show. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. He asked this question, and I thought it was very engaging. And It really helped me out to figure out how he thinks when it comes to moving forward with this offseason. So, what would you say at this moment? So, for you, that 18th of April 2025, are the main holes on the roster now, and how many do you believe there are that we need to still address on the roster? So, yeah, just maybe I can jump in on you as well, figure this out together. But what would you say?
I think the glaring hole.
Particularly starting positions, I would say.
Okay, starting position.
Yeah.
Again, because the thing that I would say would be depth, right? So that would be like the
Well,
glaring
as
hole.
you
But
add a
again, we are
starter,
talking about positions.
your
Okay,
depth
so
gets fixed.
I guess for me, I think a glaring hole is safety
Yep, agreed.
outside of Blankenship. I don't know what you have.
Let me write this down. Yeah,
I think a
safety.
glaring. Yeah, so I said safety. Another glaring position is cornerback too. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's another big an edge. I think is probably um
1,000.
right. And then I guess in terms of hierarchy, the fourth would be interior defensive lineman. So another defensive
Yep, for
tackle or
sure.
another, interior lineman there. And then in terms of the offensive side, I
Are
would
you going to
probably
put tight end? Just going to assume that Goddard's going to put
I
tight
mean, we could put tight end there, but again, I don't think they value tight end very much. So
end?
I don't think they're going to address it unless it's a trade in the draft or something, or some sort of casualty from, cap casualty or something like that, right? Like I think we kind of see based on their moves, but we could put tight end there, sure, because that is like a glaring hole on the offensive side of the ball, and then probably guard is
Yes, I was going
probably
to say.
the other position, but even then, I think they're happy with what they have. So
Right.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of investment at guard. I don't think you're going to see a lot of investment at tight end. But I think you'll look at safety. I think you'll look at cornerback. I think you'll look at defensive end and defensive lineman in general is who they're going to try to address at this next point in the offseason, because those are where a lot of your starters, a lot of your key pieces are gone, So
So that you means you've got 6 holes. Would you include maybe, I'd say just to throw in because we don't know about Nakobe Dean's health, would you include linebacker next to Zach Bond in there too?
no, I think they like Trotter. I think they like Ben Van Simmer. Again, maybe they'll draft a guy later in the draft, like a
I
fourth,
mean,
fifth
we still
round guy.
haven't addressed the Oren Burks
Right,
situation,
right.
right?
But again, they also
Like a veteran
anticipate.
guy, you know what I mean? Like there are a
Well,
few
that's
guys.
the thing.
I honestly think, and no one's brought this up yet this offseason, but I think it's a very possibility. Kaiser White, who is very, very familiar
Yeah,
with
one hundred
this,
percent.
is still sitting out there. The only reason nobody's signed him to this point is because it would cost him a compensatory pick. I think that's a player that, given that he's gone this far into the offseason without being picked up, that the Eagles can, just as we did the first time with him, get him on a 1 year prove it
True
deal,
that.
and he's used to obviously being in this defense as well.
Yeah, 100%. That's also a very good pull by you. I was gonna say, like, I don't think they'll fret linebacker too much, because I think they either, like you said, will get a guy like Kaiser White, maybe even a guy who was the linebacker that the Patriots just got rid of, Bentley.
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 Bentley would be an addition. That would be good.
Yeah,
I like him.
that would be a really solid pickup, right? Like he's a
And
quality player.
CJ
And
Mosley is
then
also still on the market as well. CJ Mosley.
okay, yeah, so another veteran presence back there would be, you know what I'm saying? So there's linebackers out there who I think they'll just use to kind of plug in the hole anyway. And when the Kobe Dean comes back, it'll just mean like, hey, take your time with recovery. And if worst case scenario they don't sign any linebacker, Zach Bond plus a Trotter Jr., let's see what he has. Can he sustain linebacker two for 5 to 6 games? Probably. I think he'll be fine there, especially if you address what you need to do on the defensive line, because when you have elite defensive line play, your linebacker play just goes through the roof, right? You see it in all of NFL history. When you have elite defensive lines, your linebackers are usually pretty good. So again, I don't think they'll address linebacker too much, but I think, like you said, kind of those main positions we were talking about before: defensive lineman, safety, cornerback, maybe tight end, right? Those are kind of the positions I think they're going to kind of look at and see if they can fill well some of the holes on this team. So, like you said, you mentioned Kazir White, C.J. Mosley,
Yeah, yeah.
and Bentley. So I think they'll just put most of their investment in addressing the defensive line and maybe getting a cornerback late in the draft, or getting a safety in like the second or third round or something like that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Or maybe even signing a Justin Simmons or even a Will Blackman, right? Like so somebody out there who is just a veteran safety.
That's the way I kind of feel. And from what I gather, and I've been listening to, of course, Bird 365 a lot, I do believe that Justin Simmons is going to be a bird if we do not address safety in the draft. I think he's
Yeah, it
ready,
just
and
depends how much money they want to pay him.
yeah.
I don't know if they want to pay $8 to $9 million, or maybe that $10 million mark. I think they would rather pay $6 million for a guy like Blackman as opposed to $10 million for a guy like Justin Simmons. You know what I'm saying? Because Justin Simmons, he could have been an Eagle probably a couple years ago or even a year ago, but it was a money issue. He wanted that. He wanted like $12+ million a
Yeah,
year,
I think he was in that. I think it's a different phase of his career, honestly.
which is fair. And again, that wasn't that long ago though, right? So, and again, you still have Reed Blankenship to kind of figure out and pay. We extended him for a year, but he's
By the
on
way, I've not mentioned his name once today. He was also
right.
another very key. I think, given the fact that he was an undrafted free agent, for us, is a key piece to our defense now.
100%, 100%. And again, it's we have to extend his contract too. You know what I'm saying? So, uh, he's probably going to be the highest paid safety on our roster. They may bring somebody in who isn't necessarily a super drop off from Justin Simmons. No, the name value's there with Simmons. I don't know if the play is there. Like I think Blackman was a former safety in Indianapolis. He's not very old. I think he's 26, 27 years old. He has a little bit of an injury history too, but you know what? Quality player when he's out there. He's reliable, he's savvy, he's smart, not really out
I
of
don't think
position
that
all that
stuff really
often.
bothers me anymore because I've had so many players that come into this team who've had injury histories. One being one that just broke the all-time record of rushing
Yeah,
postseason
exactly.
and regular
When you're
season.
around other great players, you're around other great players. You're
You're
not
also
going
in
to
a
get hurt.
system where you're in a good organization that knows how to manage you properly and doesn't over stress you.
And that's a testament to Sirianni and how he constructs practices. So that used
And
to be a knock
everybody
on
who makes
him.
fun of us
In
for not
2023, it
having
was a knock on him.
everyone who makes fun of us for not playing our players in the preseason or treating the joint practices as and not hitting during training camp and stuff like that. All those people can just take a back seat now because it's clearly become a method that has proven to be successful. One of the big things that led to the demise of Doug Peterson was the fact that we would have, I would say, about 60% of our roster unavailable to play during his last two seasons in Philly, especially that last year that ended up with the Devontae Smith pick following and his firing. The amount of injuries across the roster was insanity. We had a guy at running back. I forgot what his name is now. The second part of that season, I remember because I brought him in on fantasy football. I don't even remember his name.
Mhm.
He was getting that bad. But anyway, let's get back into this subject. So this is where I'm going to try to kind of drive home the exercise and see what we could do. So I want to take a look at last year because, of course, last year resulted in us winning the Super Bowl. So if you take a look at this time, and I'm not going to include Saquon Barkley or running back as a whole because we're talking about look at exactly 12 months from now, right? So I would say these were our holes on our roster last year at this point. I would have said guard was still a hole because um, Jason Kelsey just retired. We've shifted Jurgens to center. And by the way, we had a center who had never really played a full season starting at center, right? So that's another thing, but I wouldn't have called that a need. But I would have said guard was definitely a need. I would have said wide receiver 3 was a need. Would you not have agreed? Right?
I didn't really care for wide receiver three. We don't really
Right.
throw it to them.
But still, I would say it was a hole.
I get you. I understand. Yeah.
I would say we didn't know what Milton Williams was going to be yet in terms
Mhm.
of, like, right. He was a rotational defensive tackle for us. So I would have put defensive tackle as well last year as a need. I would have put as well edge rusher as a need, right?
Mhm.
Opposite BG.
Right.
No, not opposite BG. Instead of BG, I thought BG was more of a rotational, like towards the end of his career sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I got you.
I would have said both linebackers were question marks. I know what Zach Bond turned into and that he was on the roster a year ago.
Yeah, but we didn't know.
We
Nobody
didn't
knew.
know what he was, right? I would say, okay, safety wasn't a need anymore because we had CJ at this time last year. But CB2 was a need, right? And CB3 was a need, a slot corner. So this year we have 7 needs. Last year we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Am I missing anything? I feel like I had 9 in my original. Maybe we had 8, not 9.
Maybe. I mean, I'm trying to think what it was like outside of guard.
Did you look at safety last year with Reed Blankenship and CJ in there at this time and thinking we're good?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page there.
Yeah, yeah. I feel confident in Reed Blankenship. I do.
Okay.
Even last
Well,
season, I thought he was a quality player.
all right. Well, let's just take that as a template. So
Sure.
somehow we went from that to almost a perfect roster that ended up dominating the NFL, right? So
Mhm.
how did we address those from there moving forward, right? CB2, obviously, draft, right? CB3 is also draft. Linebacker, I would say linebacker was Timu,
Mhm.
like we've done, like as in already on the roster, we've signed him, we don't know what it is.
Right.
And internal, I would call what Nakobe Dean was, which was an internal upgrade, which is what we're trying to do with a bunch of the guys like Sidney Brown or Keely Ringo,
Right.
or, you know what I mean, right? Or Tyler Steen to a certain
Mhm.
effect, maybe Jeremiah Trotter as well to a certain effect, right? Edge rusher, I'd also say we addressed that internally with Nolan Smith.
Sure. And Jalix Hunt.
DT, we addressed it internally with Milton, him stepping up. Guard, post draft, we signed Mekhi Becton. And wide receiver 3 was a trade preseason to get Jahan Dotson. So, that being said, how do you think we can mirror that this year? So, my question would be among the 7 holes, which of those do you think could be fixed with what we have already in terms of internal and in terms of, the 1 year fix to see if they could fit in there and win the job and be like a Zach Bond?
Okay. Well, I guess just based on the way the roster is right now, the only internal ones that I think could be solved are guard and cornerback.
So, you think Steen, or do you think,
I think Steen or Keegan.
or
I do like Trevor Keegan a lot.
just Kenyon? Does Kenyon include
Or
Kenyon?
Kenyon, or Kenyon. I mean, yes, he was an acquisition, but he's basically going to be an internal upgrade essentially, right? Like at this point. So guard would probably be one of those positions. I think they want Tyler Steen to be the guy.
But question is whether we want him to be the guy or whether he becomes that. Like Nakobe Dean became, like before his injury, was a great linebacker this year. He produced. Nolan Smith produced. Like Milton Williams produced and produced in his bank account. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm not talking about whether we want it to happen. Like, what do you think of these guys? If you're going to trust any of these guys, will hit?
Well, I think Keeley can hit. Because we've seen it before. We've seen him out there. He was raw. Remember the kid's 22, and now he's got a year under his belt in Vic Fangio's defense. Now he's playing cornerback too. You got Quinyon Cooper. Like the talent around him is a little bit better than it was his rookie year. So I think he can hit. And you have Adoree Jackson pushing you. At guard, I believe in Trevor Keegan. I do. I think he can hit. 100%. I know he doesn't have the track record in the NFL of doing so, but you know what? He was a key piece at Michigan. We got him in the 5th round, and if it wasn't for that talent in the offensive lineman draft, he probably would have been a 1st or a 2nd round guard in any other draft. So I believe his talent does speak for itself. If he has an opportunity to play, I think he'd be a quality player. And with Tyler Steen, I know he's not a superstar player, but he's also not a bum like people want to make him out to be. We've seen him out there on the field playing guard, and he did an okay job. It's not like he was completely lost out there. Was he Mekhi Becton? No, he wasn't. But you know what? Not a lot of players were last season. You know what I'm saying? So again, and it's also one of those positions on the Eagles offensive line that's the most replaceable because we basically replaced it every single year since Isaac Seumalo has been replaced. You know what I'm saying? So
You're not
when you
playing
have
Jurgens there.
right. And then you moved him to center, and then you had to fill guard again, and you put Mekhi Becton there, and now you got Mekhi Becton gone, and now you got Tyler Steen, Trevor Keegan, Kenyon Green over there, right? So that position is one of those
If
positions
we
in the
didn't address
offensive
the
line.
draft, you wouldn't be sweating at all?
Say it one more time.
If we didn't address guard at all, with all 7 rounds went, and we didn't address guard, would you still feel safe?
Yeah, I'd feel fine with it. Because again, you also brought in Matt Pryor too, who was also a capable guard as a security blanket as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think they want Tyler Steen to be the guy, but it may work out where they think Matt Pryor's the swing tackle, but he'll end up being the starting guard, and then Tyler Steen becomes the swing tackle. You know what I'm saying? Like, it may just work out like that, where, and if Cam Jurgens goes down with the bad back that he has, then Landon Dickerson comes play center, and then you put Trevor Keegan or somebody else at guard. Like they mix and match a lot. The things that have to be consistent for this Eagles offensive line to work is that left tackle and Lane Johnson. As long as Jordan Mailata and Johnson are there for the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think you're going to have a lot of issues on the offensive line. I think they can make it work on the interior as long as those 2 pillars are there. And I know Landon Dickerson is considered a pillar too. He was originally drafted to be a center, but he was so elite they just put him at guard. You know what I'm saying? Like McMullen says it all the time.
I
The
don't think
best
we could have
center on the
waited
team is
to
playing
make
guard.
Dickerson a center. I think
Yeah,
about how good he's been, like he's now in his 4th season in the NFL. He's 3 seasons in until Kelsey left.
right.
There's no
100%.
way.
100%. He's just an elite player. So, and again, He's a pillar. So if Cam Jurgens all of a sudden is gone and you put him at center, you still have a three-headed monster at the point of attack here.
And
They
let's
can
be
plug and
honest
play
as
guard.
well. The Eagles are going to address the offensive line. This is the Philadelphia Eagles. This is completely like, you know what I mean? Like, whether it's going to be tackle or guard, I actually still think we need an alternative, like a backup to Jurgens, because I think that Jurgens has got his back issues at the moment, as well as the fact that I just, I think, but that could be a six. We have like 4 5th rounders, right? I imagine some of those will be moved on, but I wouldn't be surprised if we draft a center in the 5th round as a backup, as a player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And again, they may not even draft a center. They may just draft another
They could
guard
also just get
because
one
they'll just
in
slide
on
Landon Dickerson. Because remember, your backup center is Landon Dickerson.
but the
You know what
pro
I'm saying?
right, correct. Yeah.
So it might be
But
easier to
then you
find a
gotta
guard.
address another guard. But he has brought in like how many guards this summer he brought in Pryor, he's brought in Kenyon Green, and that's it. Okay. He's brought in
Yeah.
Pryor and Kenyon Green. Okay. So
Right. So it might be easier to find a guard as opposed to finding because we tried a late round draft pick for center and he wasn't very good. You know what I'm saying? Like McMahon was there. They brought in Gates to
he's
help
actually
kind
he's
of
actually an unrestricted free agent now.
right. So it's not like they haven't tried it in the past. I think it's just easier for them to find a guard and then plug and play Landon Dickerson at center if
Right.
Cam Jurgens somehow goes down. You know what I'm saying? There's probably more talented guard than there is at center.